Hello, and welcome to episode 36 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate. My name is Xerxes, and that's about the only thing we know for sure in this episode. My panelists today are...
I'm Bobinator.
I'm Carl.
And I am Satania.
On this podcast, we have but 3 rules. Rule number 1, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Rule number 2, you can nominate one game via 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. That's right, we have stopped accepting nominations via Twitter for the foreseeable future. Rule number 3, you can nominate games that have already been nominated, but don't nominate games we've already ranked. You can see the master list for yourself. Check it out, bit.ly/47kgames. That's bit.ly/47kgames. All right, so our next game is brought to us by another 5-star review on Stitcher. This one is from Kyle Latino. Says, 5 stars, wonderful, fun, and informative. I love the rapid-fire ranking of 3 games an episode. The breezy format keeps the show conversational and entertaining, but heaven help you if you are the host with a low opinion of Bushido Blade. Listen to that episode. It's fun. I can't wait until they talk about Top Gear Rally for the Nintendo 64. So thank you, Kyle. We will talk about Top Gear Rally for the Nintendo 64.
Starring Jeremy Clarkson and the Stig. I had to put that in there. I'm sorry. I don't really know much about that show, but
So, well, let's go through the let's get through the formalities here. Top Gear Rally was developed by Boss Game Studios and published by Midway Games in the United States and Kemco in Europe. For the Nintendo 64, earliest release date and territory appears to be October 1997 in North America, which seems a little bit late, but it must be right. How many people played Top Gear Rally back in the day? Hands up.
I did not.
Oh.
Well, I do know that Top Gear actually has been a racing series that was originally established on the Super NES by Gremlin Graphics.
Yeah, the original games... They're kind of your typical British 60-minute racer where it's kind of Outrun-esque with a behind-the-car view, kind of a flat pseudo-3D view, but you've got other race to deal with.
The Super Nintendo ones are about as realistic as you were going to get on a Super Nintendo in a weird way. And I remember them mostly for being kind of like technically impressive more than they were fun, which is, well, that sounds like a diss, what I'm about to say, but being technically impressive, funness notwithstanding, which is a kind of a hallmark of a lot of these. It was made in the UK, right?
Right.
So
this plays a lot differently. This is more of a semi-realistic racing sim.
Semi-realistic, but the physics are bonkers. So it's kind of like, it's weird because this came out about the same time, I believe, as the first Gran Turismo, or it existed on the same shelves, so to speak. And Gran Turismo is a way more realistic game. And it even features rally racing, which is what this game is ostensibly trying to recreate. In a way, its unreality feels more different than regular racing than the rally modes do in Gran Turismo. So just to give you an idea like what rally racing is, it's usually a dirt track, like not exactly off-road, but, not paved road. And you're supposed to have like a navigator who tells you which, how to turn, and you got to, there's a lot of memorization that goes into it and stuff like that in real life.
I don't think any of us are really into realistic racing games because this is the sort of game that wants you to choose your handling, it wants your suspension, what kind of tires you want, and I don't care about any of that. I just want to go fast, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's an intermediate grade between. I do like realistic racing games a little bit. There's a point where I kind of check out, but every now and then I want to really pretend like I'm a car geek and like learn a lot about displacement ratios and stuff like that. And it really is. It's not nearly as complicated as Gran Turismo. Let's put it that way.
Well, nothing is, but then again, nothing's quite as boring as Gran Turismo either. Top Gear Rally is
So this is a game where your car can just like launch into space almost off of the like that's what I mean when the physics are a lot closer to what you'd expect from Mario Kart than what you would expect from Gran Turismo. It also has a cool feature where you can do custom paint jobs on your car, like drawing whatever you can manage to draw with the N64 analog stick. And for me, this mostly meant just drawing like blood splatters all over the front of the cars. I just never got tired of that. We called them like, we'd name the cars like, it looked very Death Race. And the other cool thing about this game, and this is about all I can say about it. The other cool thing about this game is that the damage to your car when you hit another car, hit the wall, was super exaggerated for game purposes. Like in Gran Turismo, like I think you'll get damage to your car that isn't necessarily visible, at least in the games I play. I haven't played beyond the PS2 one.
Yeah, no, they actually said this, I believe, in an interview at some point where they basically said, look, we chose between like higher fidelity graphics or car deformation. We went, no, we want the cars to look freaking tremendous. So
right. In this game, the cars, in this game, the cars look, I mean, they look smoother in a way than the polygons look better than the Gran Turismo PlayStation games. You know, the models look better, but the textures are equally crap, and it's got that weird smudgy quality for the N64. But they do go all in on the car deformation. So like when you finish a race, and usually you're hitting cars all the time, like it's almost impossible to avoid it. And so when you finish a race, you get to see like your car is just completely like it looks like it's been through like a meat grinder. You know, it just looks like it's just on its way to the junkyard, and it has no effect on the handling of the car as far as I can recall. It just looks hilarious.
So
and that yeah.
They've done that also because it rewards you for driving well. You know, if you mess up, the game doesn't overly punish you. If you hit walls and stuff, the game is surprisingly generous. If I remember correctly, if we compare it to, again, Gran Turismo, you touch a wall in that game, your car basically goes into a dead stop and you lose the race. That's right, often what happens in Gran Turismo.
That's actually what I was going to bring up is, did anyone else have any big problems with controls? It feels like if you hold the analog stick for more than a second too long, you just swerve and smack right into a wall.
And what you're talking about is the dead zone in this game is about -3. Like you touch the controller even more than a millimeter or two either side, and it thinks that you want to turn 100% to the left, 100% to the right.
Yeah, it makes me
Can you tweak that though in the options?
I don't think so. I've read some reviews where people had also complained about the feather controls, where it's just like if you you really have to be gentle with the controller. Yeah, and it's because
it makes me think that like a racing wheel peripheral should have been released for the N64 like it was for Ridge Racer R4. But
I was going to say, I think it's important to understand that this is quite an early analog stick racing game. Like, it's really easy to forget that analog sticks didn't really exist at the time. Right. But it's true. You know, this is quite an early analog stick-based game, so they didn't... And these guys hadn't done that many racing games before, the company that made this one, so it feels like this may have even been their first racing game, and they had this Top Gear license from previous titles, I think. So the analog controls are not what you would expect, mostly because if you've used the N64 controller and you use the PlayStation analog sticks or the Xbox analog sticks, the N64 has got this very... Like, it's a very short controller. You can only move it a little bit before you kind of tap out. You know, like, the actual directions are pretty short. You kind of have off, slightly on, almost completely on, and fully, like, all the way down. So it feels like they couldn't quite get that balance right. And unfortunately, it means that you have to really be gentle with the controller. And I guess when you're playing a racing game, and this one is a realistic game, if we're being honest, it's trying to be realistic.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it's got that, and it's like, when you look at it, and if you compare it to a lot of the other N64 racing games, you expect it to be like Mario Kart, where you kind of slam the stick left and right, you know, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to do maximum left, maximum right. And if you do that, you crash.
Here's a loaded question for you. Why should I play this game if I already think F-Zero X is the best racer for the system?
You shouldn't. I mean, it's mostly It's mostly a game like you can't. I can't recommend it to anybody for any purpose other than just the fun of. Well, I mean, it's a kind of realistic racing game where you can just go off the track and cheat. I believe
the game is designed to let you cheat. They're very specific in the manual, and I think in the preview video that I watched of the game, like a VHS that's sent out to people to get them hyped up for upcoming games. Yeah. You know, they're like, you can take shortcuts, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool.
It doesn't seem like some levels have actually specifically designated off-road paths that if you master, you can really cut down your time. I at least like that aspect of it.
Well, it's because the game starts you at 20th place, and you're expected to come first, and that's really weird. It's not a pole position type racer where you start close to everyone else. No, it's more like Daytona, where everyone else has half finished the race, and you're at the very back.
Yeah, you're at a serious disadvantage. I mean, it's what I'll say about this is it's not like a perfect blend of arcade racer and realistic racing sim. It's more like a realistic racing sim that they realized, oh wait, this isn't any fun at all, and we can't really do this justice. Let's just allow players to go anywhere and kind of add in some arcadey elements to it and just make the physics totally nuts.
Well, I think because they wanted to go realistic with the physics, and then they must have started doing it, and they were like, oh, wait, realistic physics are freaking impossible right now. Let's do something different then. This whole game is, in terms of where you position it, this is basically the realistic racing game in 1997 for someone who accidentally bought an N64 instead of a PlayStation for realistic racing games. You know, it's like somehow, you know, you love sports racing, you love actual racing, realistic games, and you ended up with an N64 for whatever reason. And so it's like, well, what are my choices? There's like 3 or 4 realistic games on the entire system, and you know, there's only a couple of other realistic games. I think there's like a Formula 1 style racing game, and even something like Ridge Racer 64 is like as close as you get to realistic racing. That's kind of nuts that's as close.
I feel like even if it's not the same type of racer, there is like, you should just play Ridge Racer instead. I don't think this game could offer anything that game could not.
I mean, the short answer is you should play a PlayStation racing game if realistic racing was your thing, because Gran Turismo set the bar super high.
But if you want to paint blood splatters all over your front of your car as if you're playing like Death Race 2000 or something, this is the only game that's going to scratch that itch.
Well, it takes a whole memory pack to store one of those, I think. Like the whole pack.
Yes, it does.
Well, there's all those in Sega Rally Championship if we're talking about rally games.
Well, there's Colin McRae Rally on the PlayStation. Was a fantastic rally game, if I remember correctly. I haven't played that one since it came out, but I remember it being quite good.
So where do you put a game like Top Gear Rally? Like
that's the problem, because we don't really have any kind of reference point to go with on this.
No, but I mean, in a way, it just makes our job easier because we can say, "Hey, it goes below survival arts."
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, does this game do a good job of doing what it wants to do? Probably not. Like,
no, because controls are a mess.
I'll give them. I'm just saying. I'm giving them credit for looking at a game that they probably started out. It's like it's going to be one way, and they're like, "Oh, this isn't any fun," and so they salvaged it, and it was definitely playable because I played a lot of it.
It's playable, which is a testament to the game that it is playable.
And it was fun even in single player.
It sure is a game. So I think we need to rank it where just games go, if you catch my drift.
Well, I think part of this one is, you know, the main feature in this game is basically you can paint your car, which is kind of odd that that's the selling point once you sort of break down what this game does special. It's you can paint it.
And just the fun of seeing the ridiculous state your car is in when you finish a race is also kind of, you know, these are you got to grab the little pleasures while you can.
It's trying to be a little bit better than it. Like, this game could have tried less and probably been as.
Oh yeah, there were definitely I think there was an N64 game. What was it called? Automobili Lamborghini. That they was supposed to come out pretty close to launch and was delayed for years and is total garbage. So this is way better than that.
I think the problem with it is that it doesn't quite nail Gran Turismo style realism, but it also doesn't go far enough with wacky craziness. Because, you know, something like Beetle Adventure Racing or these other games that had you driving through cities and crashing through buildings and swerving through fantasy environments and stuff. You know, they were that's really fun and interesting. But this game kind of teases that, you kind of race in jungles and things are kind of a little bit less realistic than Gran Turismo, but, it doesn't really fit either niche very well. How many people want kind of realistic racing that's kind of okay? That's the real problem with this game.
I guess nobody, but you could play this game and find yourself surprised by how much fun you're having, especially if you're a...
if you were exhausting the list of N64 racing games back in the day,
this goes pretty high on the list of N64 racing games, just because there's a lot of them, but most of them are one kind of game, and this is at least different. And they do stuff that the N64 could do. They make use of it. I don't know. I'm just saying. Like, look, it's not a masterpiece. It's not a game I would recommend to anybody. It's not a game I'm going to play again anytime soon, even though I do own it. But you know what? I'm just saying. I'm putting it below Survival Arts, above No One Can Stop Mr. Domino.
Wow. That's fine. That's kind of the ranking for games I just don't want to play or really think about anymore.
I was actually going to place it even higher, but I am not going to be generous. I'm not a big fan of racers.
And here's my reasoning, is that most of the games above that point are probably worse games than Top Gear Rally in a lot of ways. Like Friday the 13th is definitely a worse game in the playability front.
It's a lot more
Gekibo is also a worthy, but they're more innovative.
Yeah, exactly.
And whereas Top Gear Rally is kind of like the innovation came when they realized they couldn't do the kind of game they started out making. Yeah. And so it's impressive in the sense that they made a playable, fun game out of this that you wouldn't feel like you got cheated if you bought it. It kind of delivered on its promise, but not really. But just enough that you felt like, okay, I got something here. And but it doesn't really innovate. It's mostly a technical achievement. And in 1997 for the N64, like, technical achievements don't carry a lot of water these days.
I thoroughly agree. And I think the main thing is all the value adding in this game, all the little things, none of them propel it above a good racing game. Like, you could add the customization to Gran Turismo. You can add the deformation to Gran Turismo, and it'd be like, yeah, cool, it's got it. But it's the fact that ultimately that's like, yeah, I can do this cool stuff, but I could just play Destruction Derby or something, which is more like is more fun and still has car destruction or something. Racing. Nothing in this game makes it better as a game to play. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's neat, but I'll just play a better game after this.
For a racer to hold my attention, it really needs to have some little X factor in it that makes it stand out, and Top Gear Rally just really does not have any of that for me. It's kind of mediocre, I'm sorry.
And for me, this is just my own personal taste, nothing more, but I just find this sort of racing game just really dull. There's nothing that grabs me. I don't really see an appeal, but that's just me.
Play Wave Race.
I love Wave Race.
That's what I'll say.
Yeah,
Play Wave Race.
It was even earlier. A launch game for the N64, wasn't it?
It was a launch game. It definitely is. It's kind of pretty damning to say that the Top Gear Rally it feels a little bit like Wave Race in a lot of ways.
But Wave Race is on water, and that's more innovative.
Yes, that's
there's
a
Wave
jet
Race. There's F-Zero X.
Wave Race is the game to play. But if you played Wave Race and you want to see what Wave Race is like with cars, Top Gear Rally.
Yeah, but then there's Extreme G.
I think we're done. We're done.
He's trying to say before someone mentions Hydro Thunder.
I love Hydro Thunder.
It's too late now. All right, our next game for the show is Clash of Steel, which was nominated by Pochi Pillar on iTunes. It was developed and published by Strategic Simulations for MS-DOS. Earliest release date and territory, 1993. Nobody knows. Somebody please talk about this game so I don't have to.
I got
Hey, let's not set this game up for failure.
No.
Is Bob going to talk about this game?
I looked at the manual and my brain kind of died.
Yeah,
that's not talking about the game. That's talking about the manual, which starts with a paragraph that is in hyper italics. You got to open this up. I tweeted a picture of it. It's fantastic.
Just to lift the curtain a little bit for the audience here. A lot of times when people nominate games, we haven't actually played every game that's ever been made, believe it or not. And sometimes we play a game for the first time because it was nominated. And this is a weird situation for us because, like, I'm with Bob in here. Like, I tried to get into this, and like, I could literally feel parts of my brain shutting down.
So let's talk about what it is before your brain completely turns off.
I think I did, but okay, go ahead.
This is a top-level military global diplomacy simulator for the European front in World War II. And it is exactly what you think it would be if you're familiar with what most of those words will mean for a game. You see Europe. You can play as the Axis. You can play as several different allies. And I think the Axis you can play as the Germans. And I think you might be able to play as the Italians, but you can definitely play as the Germans. And you can play as the Russians or the European. I think you play as the English and the French. I'm pretty sure you can play either of those. And you get to choose a part of World War II. So you can choose to start at the start of World War II or at specific historical turning points. And then you do things like order troops around, get reinforcements, do some very basic diplomacy, do some very basic research. And your goal is to either win the war, or if you're playing as Germany, kind of alter history a little bit and survive until 1945. And I guess then you just win because Germany invents the super bomb. I'm not really sure, but that's the goal of Germany.
So
survive until 2016, November.
To go on a different track real quick, I do like some strategy every so often. I kind of enjoyed like Master of Magic and discuss that, but this is on another level entirely.
It's boring.
This is the closest you can get to realistic general. And by general, I mean actually like general. Is it MacArthur was the general for World War II, I believe?
Well, there were several generals in World War II, believe it or not. But yeah.
I would actually believe that. But, you know, you are basically playing as the super mega ultra boss. And you are kind of a dictator in this game because it doesn't matter what side you pick. You are the singular authority. So you can say, no, I want to build nothing but tanks, just tanks, nothing else, tanks and tanks and tanks and tanks, and see if building nothing but tanks would win you World War II. And that's, you know, that's the kind of detail you're at. No one questions you. There is a morale system for the troops that you have. It's a little percent number, which I think just dictates how well they do in combat. It doesn't.
General Cal tells us to build nothing but tanks.
So
yeah,
I've been building tanks day and night.
So Herr Churchill's patented tank spam strategy won them Normandy. That's well, you know, that's one way to write the books or what. I don't know. I got nothing. I have so much nothing for this.
This game is probably the most complicated and most feature-rich game of this type in 1993. I don't think very much comes close.
Okay. I can admire that on cerebral perspective and for like authentic history nuts. Like my dad's a really big fan of the Civil War and he'd appreciate a game like this that took place in 1860, I'm sure. But
I like the idea that wars have fans.
That's the thing I wanted to say about this game being fun. Do you think this strategy was fun for the actual generals back in the 1940s? No. This is fun.
No, but that's okay.
They were pissing themselves, trying to, lose as few troops as possible, but casualties were inevitable. And
it's weird. Though.
I think it's not really necessary to moralize this kind of game because it is what it is. I would like to run this is a huge war effort, and it's at least cerebrally, as you sort of said, it is an intriguing thing to go. What if I had made the decisions in World War II? If I was making those decisions, would more lives have been saved? I want to find out. Or could the Germans have won if they didn't have a lunatic in charge? Let's find out, you know.
So I do want to say one thing about this game that really turned me off is, let's take a recent game like Mass of Orion. I mean, that's not really the same kind of game, but it's interesting. It has nice graphics. It presents things in an interesting way to keep you involved. This might as well be a spreadsheet.
It is very much like, you know, if you go back and listen to our legendary Madden 95 episode of GC9X, we talk a little bit about, it really was. We talk a little bit about what's Stratomatic or Statomatic or whatever it's called. Like a weird baseball stat simulator type thing. It's like, it literally is just like a bunch of spreadsheets and algorithms and stuff. And that's what this game seems like to me. It's like, it's hard for me to say anything about it because I can't even approach it on its own level.
Yeah, I mean, I want to just compare this to what we're talking about now to a prior episode where Cal pretty much took the reins explaining Knights of Crystallion because he has some sort of magical power to cut through boring or obtuse games and wring some actual logic out of them. I don't know how he does that. Cal's a better man than I.
He's the crap whisperer.
But I did want to say, at least in Crystallion's favor, it's almost unapproachable, but it's a creative game. I'll give it that.
Well, I mean, this game is creative, though. Like, to come up with all these alternate scenarios and stuff and things that can happen if you do this differently. And that takes a level of creativity, like kind of creativity I can't appreciate.
Well, you have to remember, this company, SSI, had been making this style of war game for almost a decade at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Which is insane to think about, that they started in the early, 80s making war games, and they just kept making them. They made millions of dollars and millions of sales of war games, which is nuts. Throughout this period. And so this is kind of the paramount summarization of them making these games and going, what if we make it a little bit better? What if we tweak this? We add more stats here. And there is a lot of detail in this game. And if you guys have difficulty kind of getting your head around the game, imagine building this game. Imagine building a game that is so.
Yeah, I'm going to give SSI their due there. I mean, they know their craft. They know it well. They have designed what is technically a very, elaborate game that considers all sorts of things, terrain and weather and timing and all that. But it's not mine super crystals out of a giant creature skull creative now, is it?
Like Masters of Orion?
No, like Crystal.
Oh, no.
Crystallion.
I'm sorry. I'm being slightly irrational at this point.
I think you can do that in both of the games. But but, I mean, the weird thing... Okay, so we've kind of explained the strengths of this game. It's hard because I don't think any of us are hardcore wargaming types. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
maybe Bobinator's really into that kind of thing, but not.
All I know is Advanced Wars, and even then, just the first.
That's
as far as I go.
Yeah.
This is like the bizarro opposite of Advance Wars, because Advance Wars is fun. It has interesting, wacky characters and catchy music and clear rules.
But it's also rock, paper, scissors, and there's in most scenarios, there's only one way to win. And it really does come down to trial and error, where I don't think that is true of Clash of Steel.
I really do like Military Madness on the TG16 also.
But that is also gets kind of in that territory, whereas this game is to make a game like this where you can do all kinds of stuff and really experiment and have fun exploring the possibilities. The problem is what does a game like this have to be fun on a regular, on the mortal plane of funness? Does it have to stoop to our level of fun to succeed?
My opinion on this one is very specific, is that this game almost exists completely outside of regular, what we would call gamers or gaming, because this game is really not, if you are someone who goes and plays a Mario Brothers platformer, or even something like Advanced Wars, or any all these games, shoot 'em ups, shmups, whatever, you don't go and I played those a bit. Now I want to play a hardcore military simulation game for the next 40 hours. Like you don't. What you're saying.
In a lot of ways, as a game, like it's a game that has more in common with encyclopedias than it does other games, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and it has an audience that looks for that, and they're not going to overlap that much.
Not that odd. Yeah.
But this game is also built off the tradition. There's a lot of board games. There's some, I think Avalon Hill, Hitler's War is a famous one, that are like this. They're basically a representation of World War II in the European theater, and you just run the campaigns. And this game does this as well, where you can play hot seat, you can play 2-player, you can both compete in running a war effort against each other. And that's, it's for people who want that kind of grand scope. It's not a fast sit-down play session. This is the exact opposite of that. In a lot of ways, games like Master of Magic, Civilization, Advanced Wars, these are all ways of distilling what this game wants to represent into a digestible format, which doesn't mean I don't think this makes this game bad. No. It just means that this game is a completely, like, the market for this game it's not us, and it's a very specific set of people. It is almost like if you have ever thought, I want to own some World War II memorabilia. I want to own the helmet, some gear. I just want to own that. That's the kind of person who also says this game is going to be really cool.
Yeah.
Wait, is it unfair to say this is the sort of game that you can really only appreciate if you've grown up playing it for most of your life?
I don't think that's true. I think that there are people who will play this game or play games like this game or its successors, who will suddenly find it and be like, this is what I've been looking for all my life.
Oh,
like,
so you need to be
this
old
is what I want
to enjoy it.
No, I think it's you've got to be the type of person who really wants to do this. And just because there's only a couple hundred of them in the entire globe doesn't mean that.
I will say, to be fair, there's probably because I know how many copies these games sold. I think it sold maybe 500,000 copies this game, so it's probably about that many people in the world kind of deal. I have from myself, I have cousins who love like World War II military history. They adore it. They almost do reenactments, not quite at the moment, and they do the miniatures that are all tank battles in World War II.
Who led the Australian forces in World War II? Was it a koala?
Racist.
Yeah, yes, Senator McKwala is
that koala, sir. That koala served his country like a man.
We have been condescending.
There were Australians on the Western Front, incidentally, but most of them were recalled back.
What was the Emu War? I love the Emu War.
I'm not going to talk about the Emu War. That was a national travesty.
What? I'll have to look into this later.
But, these are people who really do get into this specific thing. Like, this game has esoteric rules. It does have things like there's like the Russian winter is built into this game. There's specific events in World War II that if you set them up, like the Balkans kind of stuff, you can set it up and trigger this kind of thing because they know that people that play this game already know what happens in World War II. It doesn't explain very much about what's supposed to happen. It does in the manual, but the manual's like, look, you must know about World War II if you bought this game. And that's something that I think is very important about this game. You didn't buy Clash of Steel and think, what I really hope I'm getting here is a lightweight, easy to get into, like, military game.
Yeah.
Like at the time, Nintendo War.
Yeah, nobody's gonna be like, all right, I bought Clash of Steel, now just give me the gist of it. Like, what happened?
Yeah, like they break out the manual is 38 pages, A4, back to back, side to side, huge thing.
Wait a minute.
A small print.
Wait a minute.
You break that, you read the whole thing because that's what you do, and you want it to.
Wait a minute. You kids didn't hear how World War II ended. We won.
USA. Yeah. No, I mean,
and that's the thing. Like, this is a game for an audience. We're probably not the audience, which makes this very difficult for us. Where the hell are we gonna put this game? Yeah.
Funny because okay, so look, we gotta like, what do we even compare? Is there anything we can compare this to on our list that?
Because we don't have that many simulation games either.
No, we do not. Well, we got Wall Street Kid, right?
is about as close as we can get.
I would say this is better than Wall Street Kid.
I'll give it that.
Hot take.
Why wouldn't she say that out of curiosity?
Wall Street Kid is just like hot garbage.
Fair enough.
This game does genuinely try and explain itself. It's unfortunately quite regrettably before the era of tooltips and integrated encyclopedias and manuals in games. But the manual itself is very well laid out. It has a quick start guide. It has a glossary. It explains all of its terms and all of the stuff. You know, if you read the manual all the way through back to back, you would probably be equipped to at least understand what was happening. And it tries its best. It's one of the first DOS games of this type to have mouse control. Full mouse control.
True.
No, it has hotkeys and it uses the cursors if you want, but you can play this with the mouse, which is really nice, especially if you were a general war gamer who didn't really understand computers all that well. You could actually play this game, which is nice.
It took them until 1993 to make mouse support. I'm pretty sure there are games from the 80s that had mouse support.
Have you
played that many DOS games with mouse support? Because it's not super common.
Like super hardcore war sims.
I'm pretty sure some of the King's Quest games have mouse support. And those
no, they did, but we're talking about military sims, I think.
The early King's Quest did not have mouse support, by the way. They backported it in like later dates, I thought. Most of those... Anyway, getting off topic.
Another kudos to Clash of Steels is that, as best I can tell, this is one of the it deserves mention as one of the hardcore military sims of this era that doesn't like fetishize the Wehrmacht. You know,
it's a very even-handed thing. It doesn't mention a lot of the grimy details of World War II.
No,
really.
Right, because that would make it really unfun, I guess.
Yeah, less fun.
You know, like. There's a kind of but you know what I mean? Like there's no like the imagery, like, you know, like you got like the Panzer General games and stuff like that where you're like,
yeah, it's just got like kind of a generic military guy in its art. It doesn't have
or like even like, you know, like Japanese games did this a lot. Like they equate Germanness with like,
they still do that, and it's kind of sometimes it comes up, and you're like, "Oh, really guys, calm down."
You know, there's no harm meant by it, of course, but it just it's very uncomfortable.
But something that is good about this, and you've mentioned that, I do actually want to say there's even special units in the game. There's like Rommel. He's a special tank unit that when he shows up, he actually has extra ability in Africa. He gets bonus. Yeah. He's running it. That's really nice to actually even consider that it has extra features like that.
I mean, this game certainly has a lot of detail in it, but I've been very antagonistic because I generally dislike slow-paced games, so I don't think I could be scientific ranking this one.
Wait, no, you can be scientific because you're the only... We got to do this.
Well, okay, I'm going to suggest a completely arbitrary place to start. I'm going to lowball it a little bit, and you guys decide whether it goes higher or lower. Clash of Steel, I'm initially going to put between Rats and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Now let's haggle.
I mean, that's definitely a low in my...
Okay, here's my scientific assessment. I'm going to put it right above Clash Demon Head because they both start with the word clash. They was Clash in the title.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Arbitrary.
Serious? No, science.
For God's sakes.
Okay, so I will say that the biggest weakness
that's a comparable
of this game
variable.
Hang on.
Is actually that it's buggy, and they released a few years after this one. They basically re-released the game called Clash of Steel Future War. It's actually basically the exact same game, but slightly improved. So this game, for no less than 3 years, because that's when the next one update was released, was the premier game of its type. It was the military World War II game of this type for no less than 3 years, and it has features that are still not super common in similar Paradox-style games, I believe, to date, because they didn't necessarily do those features in the same way, which is kind of cool. And to think about it, that today, you know, you've got Paradox games. This game isn't that different to those. It's just kind of more obtuse to work out what its acronyms mean, and the graphics are rougher. But it's still got that core. Where I am thinking
You're thinking below Clash of Demon Head, then, is what you're thinking.
I was going to put it slightly higher than that. I wanted to put it above Donkey Kong Country 3.
Oh, okay. That's
okay.
No, I disagree with that.
You're allowed to do that.
I was going to say higher than Lethal Enforcers at most, and that's my final offer.
That's where I would go, because this game is a giant blank mystery to me. I don't know.
No. You know everything about this game. You are an expert, and your opinion is sacrosanct.
Xerxes BS, you already gave the inside baseball that we didn't know dingus about this one. It's in the recording. You can't take it back.
Don't tell the listeners.
For God's sake.
Don't expose.
We're really good at this kind of game. I managed to fight the war in World.
It's true.
I did good.
Yes.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
My
thinking is, I really think you guys are selling short the amount of effort that this game contains at its exact target.
Look, last episode we talked about Streets of Rage Remake. If you, instead of being a super fan of Streets of Rage, you were a super fan of World War II, this is kind of what you get. It's like, and you got to, hats off to you. Hats off to you. That's all I got to say.
Well, I know you guys hated Ninja Gaiden on an episode you ranked that I wasn't around for, but I am not placing this game any higher than Ninja Gaiden, okay? That's just wrong to me.
Let's just do that.
What? Place it above Ninja Gaiden?
Place it higher than Ninja Gaiden.
Bullshit.
Can we at least place it above Lethal Enforcers? I think
I was agreeing with you, Satenga.
Oh, sorry.
Let's place it above Lethal Enforcers, below Ninja Gaiden. How about that? That?
Between Ninja Gaiden and Lethal Enforcers, are we doing that, please?
I agree.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, sure, I've been a jerk.
My apologies to the Grognuts in the audience.
Wait. No pink revolvers in this game. It goes below Lethal Enforcers.
Okay, fair enough.
Fair enough.
That's hardly fair.
It is perfectly fair. Pink revolver.
You just wanted to put it next to Clash. I'm sick of this Clash of Clashes.
Oh, let's just put this.
You better not say that. They might make us play that next. Or Clash of Clans.
Lethal Enforcers has a pink revolver called the Justifier.
Yeah.
Throwing that out.
I mean, that's really the biggest negative about this game is that it's simply World War II. Ultimately, it is just a simulation game. It doesn't have its own spin on anything, really.
Kyle, you have done a good job.
At pizzazz into the butchery.
Yeah, you have done a good job of talking up its positives, but just simply put, most people today aren't going to be able to get into this type of game. If they would,
which is why it doesn't matter where we rank it. Our ranking is perfect because nobody's going to call us on this one.
Yeah, if they would want to play it, they just go for a more modern and sophisticated title. I don't know what, but
somebody's going to nominate like Microsoft's Close Combat, one of their few games they published before the Xbox, and then we're going to have to really.
I did want to just, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge who Clash of Steel is for. That was my main thing.
It's weird that we got to do this so many times. Like we got to do like. Fantasy World Dizzy is not for us, but
well, Fantasy World Dizzy
is not for us, but
this is.
I honestly think this Clash of Steel is better than Fantasy World Dizzy because it executes what it needed to do almost without fail. It did a very good job of it compared to Dizzy, which is kind of like but it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass because they made it a pain in the ass. Most of the problems with Clash of Steel are because it's simulating World War II, like. If you have a complicated war that's huge, then it's going to be really complicated and huge to get into it.
Yeah, if your goal is realism, it's like criticizing Gran Turismo for having too many variables to tweak.
And I would.
Yeah,
it
would be like, Gran Turismo should have power-ups to let you kill other cars. It's like, no, because then what the hell?
Yeah, I like what I like, and if I think it's boring, I'm just going to say as such. I'm sorry.
I can't believe I made it through the entire Clash of Steel conversation.
I can't either. I'm impressed.
It kept you going because you needed to say things about Clash of Steel, I guess.
I just have to be there. Wherever
Clash
there's an unpopular game.
I'm glad it was nominated because it's a good. Like we've never had to talk about something like it before, and hopefully we don't have to talk about something like it anytime soon.
Best games podcast ever. If you're a fan of something, you don't have to make an entire game about it. You can help other people do it by going on patreon.com/HG101 and helping us make this podcast by giving us a small monthly donation. For some reason, like when my favorite podcast, which provides me with over 4 hours of brand new content each month, asks me to chip in something like $3, $5, a month, I immediately think, I don't have that kind of money. I can enjoy podcasts for free. Therefore, any money I spend on them is money wasted, right? But then I had this great experience of meeting one of my favorite podcast hosts in person. This was about maybe a year and a half ago. And afterwards, I realized that although I just bought the guy a couple beers without hesitation, I hadn't been willing to donate anything to his Patreon to help him just pay his bills and keep the show on the air. So because of that, I, immediately after that, just having met him in person made me realize that I should be contributing just a little bit of something. And it feels good. I can't afford to donate money to every podcast I listen to because I listen to a lot of them, as you probably guessed. But there are a few shows that I really look forward to each week because they feel like they were just kind of like made just for me. And for those shows, I try to kick back a couple bucks their way each month through Patreon because I know that if I met those people in person, I'd feel guilty about having not chipped in. If the Top 47K Games show is one of those shows for you, if you'd really miss us if we suddenly disappeared, you should consider going to patreon.com/HD101 and sign up to donate a few bucks a month. You'll feel good and you will help us out and you'll get some cool stuff on top of that. In fact, any amount you give gives you access to ad-free versions of this show, plus an exclusive bonus segment every now and then. And at the $5 a month pledge level, you'll get PDF copies of the 3 most recent HD101 books, which I believe right now includes like a Taito book. And you'll get PDFs of all upcoming books when they're released for as long as you're a subscriber. So something to think about, food for thought. Now back to the show. Okay, our next game is brought to us by another 5-star iTunes review from the UK, from Tin Pot Gamer, who writes, a few good guys ranking 47,858 games based on the nominations of listeners like you and me. All rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate, and I think they should rank for the good old ZX Spectrum. And thank you, Tin Pot Gamer, for spelling out ZX Spectrum so I didn't say ZX Spectrum like a chump. Fantasy World Dizzy. It was developed by the Oliver Twins and published by Codemasters for the ZX Spectrum. Earliest release date and territory was October 1989, I'm sure, in the UK. So what do we say about Fantasy World Dizzy? Who played this one?
It had other versions too, It was available
I played the Amiga one.
And the other system. There's
the
not
Amiga
just
version
the ZX.
The Amiga version is slightly pretty if you don't like the ZX Spectrum's distinctive color palette.
Yeah, I was mostly familiar with the NES one myself. My brother used to rent it.
Do you like yellow, neon green, and magenta? Then we've got a console for you.
And cyan, there's some of that too, if I'm not mistaken.
And black, and white.
I cyan is basically magenta, right?
So,
no,
real quick.
What?
No, cyan is blue.
Magenta, you're insane.
It's the bluish, yeah. What am I saying?
Magenta's pinkish, so...
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
If you want a screen that is the cheapest money can buy, get a ZX Spectrum.
So real quick, I assume most of us, and probably a lot of people in general, are probably going to be most familiar with Dizzy because of the NES games, those unlicensed multi-carts and such. Because there were a couple of Dizzy games on those that people might have played.
Well, I'd say that, to be fair, it would be Americans are probably most familiar with the NES versions of it. The Europeans are way more... they know it was a PC microcomputer style game. And myself from Australia, I think we were actually probably more familiar with his Mega Drive outing because that was one of the only ones that would have gotten any sort of coverage here in Australia.
In Australia, you guys went straight from like rocks and sticks to Mega Drive.
Yeah,
pretty like nothing much. In between. Yeah, it's like you playing a little stick Rocky. All right.
Oh yeah, we go down to the local watering hole.
Rocky Sticky.
Actually, it's called a billabong. My apologies, fellow Australians. We call them billabongs.
So
okay, go ahead. All right.
Dizzy is pretty much, if the ZX Spectrum had a mascot, it would most undoubtedly be Dizzy because he used to be huge. there are like 7 mainline Dizzy games and a whole bunch of arcade spin-offs, so I don't know what happened. I don't know when people just got sick of him, but he used to be so huge for a long time. This is the third of the about 7 or so games.
If you read the UK-based retro gaming magazines and stuff, like he still draws a lot of water in certain parts of the world. So,
although to note, he did not draw a lot of water on Kickstarter, so his fan base may be not particularly interested in getting a new Dizzy game. It seems to be.
How could you improve upon this?
That's a good question. I don't know why all the games are the exact same and just get consecutively the same.
We should talk about what this game is for those who haven't played the series. Basically, they're all this puzzle platform with a little bit of an adventure game element, but not much.
Well, I would say they're basically point-and-click games where instead of just clicking between locations, you have to navigate some fairly hostile environments in order to solve puzzles.
Hostile? Okay, let me explain something about this game. All right? This is a game where there are background elements that will hurt you. Like background tiles, like torches on the wall. They're like, oh, that's a cool torch.
They don't hurt you. They kill you.
Yeah, let's not lowball that. You die if you get hurt in this game.
If you jump in front of a candle on the wall, you will die a horrible death.
Don't touch fire, You're an egg. Stay away from fire.
Look, there is no candle on Earth that is going to cook an egg from the distance.
Instantaneously.
It's not going to happen. I don't care how fantastic your world is, Dizzy. It ain't gonna happen. No, but it's just such a weird thing to do. Like put something cool, like, oh, those are cool little details in the background. No, it's not the background. That candle is right in your way, and if you touch it, you're dead.
I guess when people talk about Euro games and Euro logic, Dizzy is a great example of just how Euro a game can get.
Well, but we gotta say this though. Like when I'm talking about like a background tile, like I call it a background tile because I'm thinking in NES game logic, which does not apply.
No, this is a European game. They probably didn't take any influences from the NES for this line of games.
No, and why would they? It wasn't a popular console over there. It wasn't the benchmark, for game design. So the people who originally played this game probably, as unthinkable as it is to me, probably didn't have the same problem where they keep thinking of these things as just a little nicety background details. Like, no, if it's on there, it means something. Like we don't have a lot of stuff to play around with here.
Well, that's true with the 8-bit microcomputers. In general, you don't have background objects because you have like one sprite layer more or less. So if it's there, don't touch it.
Yeah. So I mean, so when we talk about this game and we're going to probably not, we try to be fair, but, and try to approach games on their own terms, which I think is the most scientific possible way of doing it. But
how can we be fair with a game that is very patently unfair?
Like I said, some of the unfairness might be just a game design logic that does not make sense to us because we didn't, our first games weren't microcomputer games.
Yeah, the thing is that Dizzy is more or less continuing on in the tradition of those old British adventure platformers like Jet Set Willy and Monty on the Run and what have you. Really brutal, hate you, want you to die games like that.
And it's basically one of those with the addition of kind of dumb inventory-based puzzles.
Yeah, it's kind
inventory-based puzzles that are worse than the ones in Resident Evil, I should add, because Dizzy cannot carry very much shit.
He's an egg. He has no pockets.
You get a backpack, and you get to carry an extra item. Just
the thing is, though, what makes this even better, there are items that are not just useless, but actively harm you. Like, Cal, do you want to take this, or should I?
Dizzy's drinking problem.
Okay, so early on, you can find a bottle of whiskey, and you can pick it up. But if you try to drop it, Dizzy he's just going to chug the whole thing, and your controls screw up for the rest of the game.
No.
Dizzy has problems.
Until you die? Really?
We're not 100% sure how long it lasts.
But it lasted long
so
enough.
Great.
But canonically, Dizzy is like not any older than 16, so Dizzy has a little bit of a problem.
He's had a troubled life.
It's pretty messed up, but it is Fantasy World Dizzy. I don't know how egg ages work.
It gives you a different way of playing. Like most games, we assume that we're controlling a character who wants to live. Dizzy, it plays the way it plays because Dizzy desperately wants to shuffle off this mortal coil. He wants to check out.
Well,
Dizzy
nobody
is
likes
not interested
Dizzy.
in living anymore. And
He's desperately trying to save his partner, girlfriend, token of affection, and he shows up and his cousins and stuff. He's like, "Hey, man, I need your help." And like, "Nah, but have this rope to hang yourself with."
Okay, nobody loves.
It's great though because you find the supporting cast of other egg people, right? And like they all have like one personality trait ever. One of them is Dozy. I bet you can't guess what his personality trait is. You find Dozy on a dock, and if you try to talk to
unconditional
him,
falling down, or uncontrollable falling down.
like you find Dozy, he's sleeping on a dock, and he gives you a thing. If you try talking to him more, Dizzy kicks him. If you kick him 4 times, he falls off the dock into the ocean and floats away, never to be seen again.
Wow, murder!
Lucky bastard. Wish I were dead. Nobody gives a shit about Dizzy. Whiskey sound effect here?
Yes, in Fantasy World Dizzy, where all your wildest egg-related dreams will come true.
Not the wildest. Trust me, my egg-related dreams are pretty damn wild.
But to not get off track too far, let's talk about maybe some things that the game does, I guess, reasonably well. It's quite a large world. It's quite well presented. There's a lot of graphics, a lot of little effects and things that the game presents to you. The puzzles are mostly solvable. Like most of them you can kind of work out, counting that you figure out what the game wants you to do, and it's not too difficult usually. There was one bit where I basically abused the pattern of an enemy resetting when I opened my inventory. Not sure if you were supposed to do that, but it was the only way I could get any further in the game, so who knows? Maybe that was the solution all along.
The weird thing, I mean, look, yet again, I'm going to bring up VVVVVVV because I love impronounceable game titles. But, I mean, that is a very microcomputer-inspired, indie game that, Dizzy does do some stuff like that. That it definitely is part of that. It's a key ingredient in that game design philosophy of like constantly dying, but you get to start over really fast, right?
Well, the big flaw with Dizzy, when you're mentioning that, is you only get a few lives, and then the game boots you to the title screen.
Right. Yeah, that's true. All right. Forget it. Never mind.
This is definitely, again, I've mentioned this before, I think, maybe on Tarkin. This is probably a game that plenty of people maybe played the version that had a trainer that gave you unlimited lives.
That must be what I'm thinking of, because the one I played, I got to try again endlessly. And I got frustrated, but I was frustrated to my heart's content.
It's really not uncommon for these games to have been pirated and people having the trainer version. Even if they owned the game, the version with the trainer probably floated into their hands at some point. This is very common on the Euro scene.
Yeah, let me ask that. Who in this game's development team thought it was a good idea to just give you 3 lives and squat else? For a game like this, that's so expansive, like, could they have a backup save option or something?
Well, the main thing
That was Clive. That was Clive.
If you figured out Dizzy, you probably got through it in maybe 30 minutes, an hour. It's not a long game if you know exactly what to do. And these games, they're trying to get them to 10-hour links. They're trying to get you 15 hours of game. And unfortunately, that means that the 15 hours has to be found in dying, doing everything again, dying, doing everything again. That's unfortunately how they achieved any sort of length in these games. And it's not ideal, but that's kind of just what people
where does the line exist between value and frustration?
Well, oddly enough, I mean, we're talking about this after our big beat 'em up episode extravaganza, and in a lot of ways, like if you could that's kind of like the secret of playing beat 'em ups now is that of course we're all playing the arcade ones via MAME, where you can just keep going as long as you want because it costs you nothing. Whereas, like, I think this game, we would look a little bit more fondly on it if we only considered it as if you had infinite lives and just could keep retrying, and then it becomes a little bit more tolerable.
This is a game you're expected to do again and again and get a little bit further every time, and maybe eventually you'll reach the end. Maybe.
If you manage to accidentally pick up enough railings along the way.
Yeah.
That's, so to beat this game, you have to collect coins. I think it is. Is it coins?
That was stars.
Forgot.
30
is
coins.
It stars? 30 coins, thank you. I thought it was coins, Mr. Stars.
It's stars in another game.
Damn it. Yeah, that's another thing.
Oh, is it stars of the NES version? Because it's coins in the ZX one.
Can't actually keep all the Dizzy games together.
But
are we talking about
there's one point where you actually have to pick up a random piece of railing that is the same as all other pieces of railing in order to collect one of these coins. So, that's kind of that's inexcusable.
Well,
like that is not Euro. That is just bullshit. Specifically,
is that the closest this game gets to a murder boat type situation? Harking back to good old King's Quest V.
There are plenty of moments in this game because this game wants you to explore. It wants you to try and figure out the solutions to puzzles, and unfortunately, sometimes failing to figure it out will just get you killed, which is
Cal.
It's not fun.
Explore or explode.
Okay, so there's not much. I don't think there's too much left that we have on this game to say. I do like some of the little touches that they put in this game. At one point, you go to Upside Down World, which was actually surprising how nice that was. That you jump through the center of the Earth and then you end up upside down and your controls are reversed. That's a nice touch. It's actually fantasy world, and it feels kind of nice that they actually put customized things in this game. A lot of Euro games tended to have very basic controls and nothing changed. You know, it was an arcade game where you just mash punch for an hour and then the game is over. So I respect this game for, actually adding like different elements, and there's characters that actually talk. There's little bits that are decent.
Their heart was in the right place. How does that sound?
Yeah.
I do think that compared to other Euros, there was a lot more heart. And that's why people, I think, responded well to these games, is that they actually had elements that kind of elevated it to, we thought about it.
Yeah, compared to Jet Set Willy, this game is a masterpiece, I think.
The music isn't as good as Monkey on the Run, though, which is a big disadvantage.
You can't always have Rob Hubbard for everything, though.
Mm-hmm.
So what was in the water over there where they got so much great chiptune composers? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so many, like
composers that also really didn't think that they were any good. They're just like, I just make music for games. It's not very good. And it's like, it's the best music that anyone's written for a system. So where would we put Dizzy? Does it go with Glover? Is that where it goes? Does it go with Rats? I'm not shooting this game high because it doesn't get shot high.
Yeah.
I'm not going to Jones Zones it because it does have.
I should mention that Interactive Studios, the people make Glover. I believe they were founded by the people who made this game. So,
and Glover deal with anthropomorphic household objects
that are white, no less. Yeah, I could see that. Weird, small world.
The thing is, the follow-up Dizzy, the Mega Drive one, was a better game. It was actually almost approaching a fun and fair game because you had a life bar in that one. So it almost got there. They kind of eventually they figured out, you know what? If these games were a little fairer, they'd be more fun. And
yeah, that's the frustrating thing about it's you're so close to making a, because you don't want to hate on a game like Fantasy World Dizzy, exclusively hate on it. Like not exclusively. What's the word? You don't want to subject it to absolute damnation, I guess, because it's you can tell that the people who made this game, they were paying attention to things and they knew what they were doing, and they were making a game for a certain audience, and it doesn't export well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's always, whenever you have these time periods, there is a zeitgeist at the time, and if you're in the middle of it, you just sort of pick up this knowledge and you just sort of get it. And that's true on the NES with you guys with Metroid, and it's kind of you just kind of know a lot of these things, and you're just like, well, I got it. It's fine. It's no problem. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because it operates within the the logic of the time period and the market and all that, and it's the people who are playing it were expecting something.
And with something like Fantasy World Dizzy, if you were, you can make copies of discs, and there's lots of games sort of floating around. So obviously people if they were playing this, kids or whatever were playing this, they were talking about these games. They were saying, hey, did you get that thing? It's like, I'm stuck. And it's like, well, what did you do? You do this. Okay, cool. And then, they bounce back and forth, and then they solve the game, and they feel like, yeah, we did it. We solved the game. Cool. We finally saw the end screen. And Dizzy's a game that I actually feel like you can finish this game. I'm not going to myself. But unlike some Euros where it just feels cheap and nasty and mean, I'm like, no, I'm never, ever going to even attempt this. This game does feel like, I think if I played it enough, I could get through it, excluding the railing thing, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
But other than that, I feel like this game is actually playable and solvable, which does push it a little bit higher than your average kind of cheap game.
The whiskey bottle thing alone just shows a little bit of heart and humor in the game that I really appreciate. Just the conversations that must have been created on the playgrounds of the.
You can get, drink the bottle, but then what do you do with the bottle? I don't know. Just drink it. It's like, it's funny. So
yeah, well, that's a good point. Well, it's a very colorful game, and it does have some degrees and touches of innovation to it, but. I guess I didn't like this one quite as much as you guys. I mean, I grew up playing some Dizzy, and I guess he never really sunk in, so...
let's look at one of our bugbears on the podcast. What do you think of this game compared to Riven?
It's funny you say that, because I was thinking, like, what I think about when I think Dizzy is, like, it feels Myst-like in a weird way. I don't know why.
Huh.
Like, there's so much craft that goes into it that you can't deny it. You can't deny the level of craft that goes into it, and it's the kind of craft that you only see from like very small development teams. It's frustrating because on the one hand, this is the kind of thing that I normally praise, like probably too much, just like weird little things that were made by very small teams that.
Well, what I like is that this is a situation where you're outside looking in on the games that you usually have played and liked already. So you can kind of see where sometimes I come in from, where I'm just like, I never played this game, and it's kind of rough and it's not very good, but there's something there. I know it's there.
But I think that like in other ways, like, playing European microcomputer games is not the same kind of, for me to go back to like Atari 2600 games, right? Barely can remember that period of time when that was the newest thing. In fact, I'm pretty sure I only played it maybe at most a few months before I first touched an NES. But you go back to those games and you can tell the good from the bad a lot easier in a way, I think, because even though it operates on its own logic, it is the spirit behind it of like, like Plaque Attack or something, like, wow, this is a crazy game, but it's playable. You can pick it up, you can do it. It's brutally difficult, but you don't feel cheated because that's all it is. That's all there is to it. Whereas with this game, because it's a kind of character-based, like platformer-ish type thing, it feels like it's promising you something that it doesn't actually promise at all. And that might be my problem with it. Is I feel like, I'm gonna have a great adventure with this cute character, and no.
So
can't. Okay.
So I think
ranked,
it's gonna be gotta jam it in the list somewhere. We really gotta take it and say, well,
I'm gonna put it. I hate to say this, but I'm gonna put it below 8 Eyes, above Hanagumi Tyson Columns.
That's actually really close to what I was looking at. I was going to say between Yoshi and 8 Eyes. So,
I'd rather play 8 Eyes.
Higher than Yoshi. Come on. I mean,
I'd say 8 Eyes and Dizzy are somewhat similar, being kind of puzzle-focused platformers that are kind of obtuse.
But Yoshi is devoid of effort.
Here we go for
in
Yoshi
almost every
bashing.
sense.
Yoshi's worse than 8 Eyes. I don't know why.
Wow.
But no, it's
scientific
not. No.
ranking and all that.
No. You're right. No, it is not worse than 8 Eyes. It is exactly one space better than 8 Eyes.
Okay.
I don't remember how, but I know in my heart that it's true.
All right. In that case, will we place Dizzy between Last Battle and Yoshi then? Maybe?
Okay. All right.
I'm just thinking. The struggle with Dizzy here is that this is not the first Dizzy game, so I'm kind of like, should they have fixed the problems Dizzy had before this game? Like, because
but they didn't see them as problems.
I know, what does that mean?
It's really hard for us to say anything about it because it's like I cannot put my head in that space anymore, or ever.
Well, I'm quite happy to look at things and say, you know what, but it doesn't mean it's fun. It's like, oh, they liked it this way. Yeah, but they don't like it that way now. No one picks this up now. It's like,
it's just kind of like, yeah.
I mean, what does Lost Battle bring to the table other than being kind of not actually as good as a really old NES
kick-ass
game?
Music.
It brings good music. And a great translation is the...
oh, yeah. It's got people
I kind of would like Dizzy to be above Lost Battle. I just feel it has slightly more heart in it than Lost Battle, which is kind of just like...
Wow.
The whiskey bottle thing, I can't get over that.
So we're gradually notching Dizzy up due to how poor these other games are. I don't know how to feel about that, honestly.
Well, would you Disney is a much more interesting game than Lost Battle, as a franchise too. I'm willing to stop. I'm willing to say no one can stop Mr. Domino and say, well, Dizzy can't stop him because Mr. Domino is an original idea, original concept, original execution.
They're both about equally frustrating.
But whereas no one can stop Mr. Domino no one can stop Mr. Domino 2 or 3 to refine itself and kind of find its space. Dizzy kind of like, well, people like it being kind of junky and not fun, so we're going to keep that. And that to me is a negative that they didn't think, maybe we should just give the player unlimited lives or something. Just give them a concession so that they can beat the game.
Yeah. No. All right, so I guess we found
the trainer version.
Okay, so I think we've talked about this too much, to be honest. So I think that we found our place here between Mr. Domino and Last Battle. Sounds like a fair compromise. Everyone good with that?
I'm okay with that. Tin Pot Gamer.
Apologies to the European continent.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Europe already hates us anyway. That's why we're playing this game, right?
Poland doesn't
coming back because they really genuinely hope that we will one day see the light. And
hey, we said Tarkin was great, and it is great.
It is great. Yeah, we have nothing but good things to say about Turrican. Yeah.
I will say there are some Euros that were really interesting at the time that I would love to try for the podcast. If anyone nominates them, I think we might sort of push some interesting things. Weird games like School Days and Fire.
Someone nominate Franco's The Crazy Revenge, please, because
please don't.
We've done Dracula's Crazy Vampire.
We played Vendetta. That's pretty much like everything. The very small amount that is good about Franco.
Fair enough.
Okay. That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to Pochi Pillar and Tin Pot Gamer on iTunes and Kyle Latino on Stitcher for nominating those games. And thanks to those of you we haven't gotten to yet, we are working our way down that list and we hope to get to you as soon as possible. And thanks to my lovely co-host and compatriots, and to our editor Jeff Rude, and our chiptune composer Muteki, and of course, thanks to the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101. I know I did. You can help us out by subscribing to the HG101's fantastic YouTube channel, or by following our fantastic Twitter accounts at GC9X and at HG_101 on Twitter. The Twitter accounts on Twitter. That's what they are. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or we'll hide our next podcast behind a completely unnoteworthy piece of railing. Until next week, keep keeping it real.